Well, happy National Signing Day. Christmas came just a few days early. So, what is LSU's class shaping up to be? Who are some players to focus on as the early signing period begins today? All of that, plus so much more on today's edition of Locked on LSU.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Well, thank you for making Locked on LSU your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast. Plus, we are on YouTube as well. So make sure to check us out on YouTube, Locked on LSU. And of course, we are part of the Locked on Network, your team every day. My name is Caroline Fenton, and I am your host, as I am every day. I graduated from LSU. I've been covering the team since 2016, and I am now a sports talk radio host in Nashville, Tennessee. Big day today. National Signing Day. The early signing period starts today and goes all the way through Friday. And there are a plethora of 4-star, 5-star, all kinds of players that LSU has been targeting, that all the other top teams in the country have been targeting. And it all comes down to today. So who is LSU targeting and who am I really looking at? Both looking at, their ranking and their skill, how much they can bring into LSU, and also looking at some of LSU's positions of need. I'll get into that coming up next. But first, I kind of want to look at, a 360-foot view of this 2023 class that LSU is bringing in. And I say 2023 class, I mean the signing class and the players coming in from high school, and also the transfer portal class as well. So, what is this shaping up to be? How much does LSU really need in terms of depth and just numbers? Not even looking at a specific position group, but what does this class need to bolster it to be, a national title contender? Something that I think we all would love for it to happen, and something that I think is all, a kind of a fair expectation. Maybe not this year. I'll take it this year, but within the next few years, absolutely. So I think before we look at the composition of this class, and Brian Kelly spoke with the media earlier this week and talked about what he kind of just the numbers of this class. But remember that the NCAA had a blanket waiver, a 2-year blanket waiver starting last year to accommodate for COVID opt-outs and the COVID, spiel that allows all FBS schools more than 25 scholarships per signing period. And remember, that includes transfer portal players as well as players coming in from high school. So while, normally every year you get 25 scholarships maximum for both your transfer portal players and your high school class, that is over like this year and last year. That is no longer a thing. You still have to stay below 85 total scholarships. That's the limit for the NCAA. But if, let's say, 40 of those scholarships come from players already on your team, well, you can give out 45 in this upcoming class, this transfer portal class, and also this recruiting class. I mean, that's not really that far off of what LSU was facing last year whenever they played with 39 scholarship players in a bowl game. I mean, it's not the craziest thing considering, COVID and coaching turnovers and the transfer portal. Sometimes schools need to take advantage of utilizing more than 25 scholarships per period. Some schools might not, but it's something that LSU plans on taking advantage of this season. Now, Brian Kelly was asked just about the sheer numbers that we can anticipate, because where it stands right now, LSU already has 25 freshmen committed in the 2023 class, as well as Aaron Anderson coming in through the transfer portal. I don't know if he would be considered a scholarship player or not. I can only assume that he probably will be. So let's go ahead and say, 25 freshman commits before early signing day. All of those players most likely will not make it to LSU's campus in the fall. That's okay. That happens. You're going to have guys that commit and then decommit based upon early signing period or based upon more offers that might come in. We see it a lot. Let's say there's a player from California And they end up getting a scholarship from USC or UCLA. They want to stay closer to home, and that's also a powerhouse football school. They might say, "Hey, it's nothing against LSU. I just want to stay close to home, or I want to follow one of my coaches." The reasons go on and on and on. So let's operate under the conditions that not all 25 will make their way on LSU's campus, but I would say probably an overwhelming majority. Let's say 20. I think 5 possibly decommitting and going elsewhere, I think is fair. But at the moment, it's 25, and you have one transfer portal player as of today. So, what does the rest of the class look like? How many players is LSU planning on picking up? Not just in this early signing period, but on National Signing Day later in the spring as well. This was Brian Kelly earlier this week talking about just kind of the sheer X's and O's and numbers of it all.
I mean, it's going to be in the mid to high 30s. So I think within a calendar year, we could be close to turning over 70 scholarships.
That's insane if you think about that. In a calendar year, let's say 2022, 70 scholarships turned over in this past year. That's almost an entire roster. You have 85 scholarships on your roster. You have 85 scholarship players, and you turn over 70 in a calendar year. I mean, that's astronomical. And you think about where LSU was this time last year, earlier 2022, January 2022, playing Kansas State in the Texas Bowl, 39 scholarship players. Brian Kelly's telling you right now they anticipate mid to high 30s of scholarship players this year, new ones, bringing in new scholarships. That's almost the entirety of its scholarship team earlier this season. It's just absolutely insane to me, just thinking about how far this team has come in just 12 months. That we are not that far removed from getting, playing a wide receiver at quarterback in a bowl game because LSU had no other option. And now we're talking about quarterbacks getting frustrated being in such a crowded quarterback room that they might transfer, which is just insane. So as we go into this early signing period, and as we talk about LSU continuing to climb up the ranks in the recruiting rankings, LSU currently sitting at 5. And there's a couple 4 and 5-star players that could even boost LSU even higher than that. Let's not forget where we came from just a few months ago and where this team can go from here. It's exciting. I'm excited about it, and I think you should be too. And props to this recruiting staff, props to this coaching staff for being able to, bring this program back where it should be, which is at the top of the ranks of college football. So who should we look at? Who am I looking at? I'm going to share that with you all coming up next. But before we do that, I want to tell you about Bet Online, because betonline.net is your number one source for sports betting information, stats, news, and analysis. So get the latest odds and trends for every professional and every amateur league out there. There's pro football, college bowl season, basketball, both NBA and college. We've got the SEC conference matchups heating up pretty soon. So get it all at betonline.net. Plus, if you love sports podcasts, you can find those at betonline.net as well. It's the fastest and easiest way to get your betting information. So head to their website today or use your mobile device to learn more. Bet Online, where the game starts. Well, thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day. So make sure to make your second listen Locked On Sports Today. The biggest stories around the sports world in 20 minutes or less, plus instant reactions, game recaps, and Locked On's take of the day. Locked On Sports Today, available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. So who am I looking at today? And there might be a recruit that you've been following, or a player that you've seen in high school that LSU is high on, that LSU is going after, that I might not mention. And that's totally fine. These are just some players, 4 players that I plucked from players that LSU has been looking at, some of the top players in the country, and my priorities for this incoming class and positions of need for LSU in 2023. Also, if it's a position of need, where they're from, their ties to LSU, since that is such a high priority of this coaching staff, as it should be. and also their ranking. And, 4-star, 5-star, how do they rank among the rest of the players in college football? No disrespect to the 54th ranked long snapper in college football. No disrespect whatsoever. However, or in high school football, he's not on my list. But let's get into it, because I think the first one that I'm going to name is a name that you might be sick and tired of me here mentioning, but that's how big this player truly is. And that is Desmond Ricks, a 5-star cornerback from IMG Academy, 6'1", 170 pounds. Now, he decided to declare early. So he actually is a junior right now, but decided to go to college football early. So he's going to be graduating with the rest of 2023. And the crazy thing is, even though he's going to be 1 year behind the rest of the players in this class, he still is one of the top players in this class. And even though he is 1 year behind, in age and developmentally, he's still going to be ready to contribute right away. I had John Garcia Jr. on the show last week, and this is what he had to say about Desmond Ricks and just how valuable he is.
With his skill set as a 6'1", 180-pound corner, he's the type that even in a reclassification situation, he could come in and compete right away, which is not something we will talk about with many kids who reclassify. But having been an elite corner at IMG over multiple years, kind of like what we said about Womack, that means you've played the best. Every day he's covering Ohio State-bound Carnell Tate, maybe the best receiver in the country. And then every single Friday night, he's playing the other team's best wideouts with substantial success along the way. So Ricks is big, he's long, he can run, he's physical, he's technically sound. There's a lot to really like about his game, and I think wherever he ends up, he'll make a huge impact. And right now, I would project that to be LSU.
So there you go. That was John Garcia Jr. Again, he is a recruiting insider for sportsillustrated.com, si.com. Saying Desmond Ricks, he has the ability, the size, the expertise to be able to come in wherever it is where he chooses to go, should be LSU. He will be ready to contribute right away, because like John mentioned, he goes to IMG Academy. He's not only playing with the best and going up against the best in practice every day, he's also playing against the best. So he's one of the top players in this class, if not the top player in this class, that has yet to commit. And we intend on him doing that either today or tomorrow or at some point in the early signing period. But he took his visit to LSU last weekend, which something that I've learned from John Garcia Jr. is whenever you take your visit closer to whenever you plan to commit or whenever you sign, that's the best sign, because you want to go out and end your recruiting visits or end your official visits on a good note. So it's a good sign that he was just in Baton Rouge this past weekend. LSU's fresh on his mind. His experience is fresh on his mind. And all recruiting insiders since before his visit and even after his visit in this past week still have him slated very highly to go to LSU. And almost all recruiting insiders say, yep, Desmond Ricks is LSU bound. Now, don't hold me to that. That's not my words. It's theirs. But I think that everybody is very excited to see where Desmond Ricks ends up, but really kind of slates him to go to LSU, which is going to be huge. If it does come to fruition, will be huge for the secondary. And if he does decide to come to LSU, then great. We'll have a full Desmond Ricks breakdown, how he kind of fits in with Javian Toviano and the rest of this defensive back group, how he fits into this defense. We'll get into that, but we're not going to get ahead of ourselves, because he is also looking at Alabama. He's also looking at Florida. Per John Garcia Jr., it's really between LSU and Alabama. Interestingly enough, two of the top defensive teams in the country, specifically at the defensive back position, are in desperate need of defensive back. So it's really between LSU and Alabama. But like I mentioned, all the recruiting gurus and insiders say Desmond Ricks to LSU. The second one, who doesn't seem like as much of a sure thing, isn't slated by many, if any, recruiting gurus to be going to LSU, but a player that I'm still keeping an eye on, I'm still holding out hope for. And that's a 5-star edge rusher out of Washington, D.C., Nicholas Harbor, 6'5", 225 pounds, a really big guy. He's the 16th ranked player in the country, and he's one of the top, if not the top, edge rushers in this 2023 class. Nicholas Harbor is a special recruit. not only because of what he can do on the football field, because I mean, whenever you're the 16th ranked player in the country, the top player out of the DC area, and the top edge rusher in this class that is, stacked with defensive linemen and edge rushers, obviously you're going to be very special. But Nicholas Harbor's recruitment has been a little bit unique because Nicholas Harbor doesn't just have NFL aspirations, he also has aspirations to run track in the Olympics as well. Both are very, very important to him. This isn't something where it's like he wants to play football, that's his number one priority, and then he'll run track in the spring just to, stay in shape. No, this is his loves 1A and 1B, playing football and running track. So that's why I thought that LSU would be kind of a front runner for Nicholas Harbor, is because they offer both of those things. Is that LSU has an elite football team as well as an elite track team. Not a lot of schools can say that. I would say Oregon is probably the first one that comes to mind of elite track team, elite football team, and playing on either. And playing football, running track on either of those teams, both for Oregon and for LSU, both can set you up to play in the NFL and also compete in the Olympics. But really right now, according to the recruiting gurus, recruiting insiders, he's high on South Carolina. That's the biggest, boldest prediction. And also on Maryland. He was in Maryland this past weekend. Maryland, rolled out the red carpet for him, gave Nicholas Harbor the 5-star, no pun intended, treatment. And that's close to home. I talked to John Garcia Jr. actually about Nicholas Harbor, and he said that Nicholas Harbor understands that he is in a unique circumstance of wanting to run track and wanting to play football. So he's not necessarily married to staying close to home, but I'm sure Maryland, within its proximity to the Washington, D.C. area and the rest of his family, I can only assume that that's a little bit of push there. So I'm still looking at Nicholas Harbor. I'm not giving up on hope just because the recruiting gurus have him slated to go to either a South Carolina or a Maryland. South Carolina, actually, we don't talk enough about how close that is to the DC area. But that's still one that I'm looking into, is Nicholas Harbor, which would be great for this defensive line. The third one is Jordan Hall. He's a 4-star defensive lineman out of Jacksonville, 6'5", 300 pounds. Huge, huge guy. He's the 6th ranked, defensive lineman in this class. He's the 12th ranked player in Florida. And I said this, I forgot about which recruit I was saying it about. I believe it was a recruit out of the state of Texas. And I said, if you are a top 20 recruit in the state of Texas, that speaks volumes to me, because there's so much talent in that state. Florida is the exact same way. It's an incredibly football talent rich state. So if you're a top 10, top 15 player in that state, that speaks for itself. But I mean, Jordan Hall has offers and has interest from some of the top teams, not even in the country, but in the SEC. You look at, he's high on Alabama, high on Georgia, high on hometown team Florida, also high on LSU as well. Florida State is new to the conversation and has kind of been one school that's been floated around and rumored with Jordan Hall. But I mentioned it on yesterday's podcast that I think defensive line and edge rush absolutely is a position of need for this team, especially since B.J. Ojulari is entering the NFL draft. So Jordan Hall would be a huge, huge pickup for this defense. And the final one is Isaac Smith. He's a 4-star safety out of Mississippi, 6 foot, 200 pounds. And if you asked me to draw up the perfect prototypical size for a safety, it would be Isaac Smith's measurements to a T. 6 feet tall, you've got some length to you, 200 pounds, you've got some weight, you've got some power, but you're still light enough on your feet that you can move around. Maybe you're heavy enough that you can affect in the tackling game, but you also are quick enough on your feet. 6 feet, 200 pounds is the perfect size for a safety. He's the 10th ranked safety in the country, 4th ranked player in the state of Mississippi. And, he also has room to grow. He's got a frame that can add a little bit more weight on, so he can play up a little bit closer to the line of scrimmage, and he can affect in the blitz game as well. I look at Isaac Smith as being almost like the perfect blank canvas of, you can continue to build upon it, but you've already got yourself, a perfectly fine base and a perfectly talented base. Again, he also took his official visit to LSU last weekend, like I mentioned with Desmond Ricks. That's huge for players to take their final visit before they do intend to commit, making the assumption that these 4 players are going to make their commitments and sign their letters of intent either today or tomorrow or on Friday. But again, Desmond Ricks, Nicholas Harbor, Jordan Hall, Isaac Smith, all 4 of which are 4 or 5-star players, all 4 of which are defensive players. That's where my mind is at today. That's where my mind is at in building up this team for the 2023 season is defensive depth. But of course, it is a Mailbag Wednesday, so I'll get into your questions coming up next after these quick words. So it is a Mailbag Wednesday. Appreciate all of you for sending in your questions every week. Again, feel free to send in your questions however and wherever you'd like. You can send them in on Twitter, you can tweet them to me, or you can DM them at LockedOnLSU, or if you're watching on the YouTube page, my Twitter handle, Twitter handle is right there at Caroline Fenton 1. So you can send those in on Twitter, and you can also comment them below on the YouTube page. Got a couple questions today, and one that I really wanted to touch on is something that I mentioned earlier on this week about Brian Kelly's philosophy of how he wanted to build this team up. And it was through freshmen. He said, while we do feel like we'll need to go through the transfer portal, really how we want to build the foundation for this program is through recruiting freshmen out of high school, playing those freshmen and building them up through the program. So one person asked me, with such a heavy influence on freshmen in 2023 and beyond, can we see freshmen playing over veteran players and seeing those veteran players transfer? I think this is kind of a 2-layer question, because I don't think that you are going to see Brian Kelly, Mike Denbrock, Matt House, this entire coaching staff prioritize this philosophy of building upon freshmen over doing what's best for the team. I think any coach in America in any sport would say, first priority 1A, the number one thing that we're going to do is what's best for the football team. Even if it's not popular, and even if, all of these ifs, ands, or buts, we're doing what's best for the football team. So I don't think that you're going to see Shelton Sampson, a 5-star wide receiver out of Catholic High coming in this 2023 class, play over Kayshon Boutte, simply because Shelton Sampson is a freshman. I know if Shelton Sampson earns playing time, and he has proven to this coaching staff that he can contribute right away, even without college experience, he can contribute to this football team, then wonderful, then he will. But I don't think that you're going to see this coaching staff prioritize freshmen just for the sake of them being freshmen over players that have more experience and that give this team a better chance to win. Now, if the freshman gives this team the best chance to win, then I have to assume the freshman will play over a player who might be sophomore, junior, or senior. Do what's best for the football team. So if that player who was a sophomore, junior, or senior is frustrated with not getting playing time over a true freshman, then sure, that player might transfer. But if that player wasn't good enough to beat out the true freshman, then no harm, no foul. Let that player go off and find a place where they can play. And that's no disrespect to any player that does feel the need to transfer away if they're not getting an opportunity. Go do your thing. Go find a place where you can contribute, but that's just might not necessarily be at LSU, and that's not a bad thing. It's just simply competition. That's what football is. That's why you bring in talented freshmen, is to, help the football team, create some healthy competition, and set your team up for success in the future. So no, this team won't prioritize freshmen just for the sake of being freshmen, but the best player will win starting jobs and will win playing time. Second question I got is, how does LSU's recruiting class compare with the rest of their college football rivals? Now, I'm going to be completely honest with you. Like, I cover LSU. I know LSU. I know what this team needs. I know the players that they're targeting. I know the players that have already committed in the 2023 class. I know the players that might commit. I know the players that will commit. And I know the players that might not necessarily stay at LSU. I don't have that expertise for Alabama. I don't have that expertise for Florida. I don't have that expertise for Texas A&M. I don't know what players those teams are targeting other than the players that are being targeted by LSU and understanding what LSU's competition is and landing those players. I can tell you that where it stands right now, before the early signing period begins, LSU is the 5th ranked recruiting class in the country, behind only 2 SEC schools, Alabama and Georgia, and then Miami and Texas at 3 and 4. That doesn't mean that LSU is going to be a worse team than Alabama and Georgia. I mean, think about so many recruiting classes in the past that might be a top 10 recruiting class, but then their teams kind of fall flat. That goes for both sides. That goes for the Alabamas and the Georgias of the world that are ranked above LSU, and that also goes for LSU. You got to bring in talent, but you also got to do something with it. I mean, I think about Butch Jones, for example, former Tennessee head coach. Butch Jones was a master used car salesman. He was able to get all these players in. He got their parents bought in, but he wasn't a very good coach. And he lost his job ultimately, even though he got consistent top 10 recruiting classes year in and year out. He didn't know what to do with them. So right now, the recruiting classes, where it stands, that's the best I can really truly give you, is LSU is ranked above Florida, is ranked above Texas A&M, is ranked above Auburn in terms of recruiting classes. They're behind Alabama and Georgia. Not bad company to be in. But again, remember, the most important thing is not just bringing the talent in, but it's developing that talent, and it's trusting your tacticians on the field. Because Texas A&M, for example, they had more 5 stars than any other school in the country, and they won 5 games this past year. So keep that in mind. It's important to bring in talent, but it's also important to do something with that talent. That's going to do it for me today. Thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen every day. Coming up on the next few episodes of Locked On LSU, a Jaden Daniels update. What can we expect from LSU's signal caller in the bowl game, and also a full recap of the early signing period of National Signing Day. What does the 2023 class look like after the early signing period? All of that coming up on the next few episodes of Locked On LSU. But thank you for making Locked On LSU your first listen today. Make your second listen Locked On Sports today. Peter Bukowski brings you the biggest stories from around the sports world in 20 minutes. Get the analysis and opinions before anyone else with their local and national experts and insiders. Locked On Sports Today podcast. It's available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.